Welcome back to Unpopular Opinion, and this is going to shock all my friends. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly wasn't that good. All my friends know I love westerns. The Man with No Name is my favorite movie character of all time. That's why it comes as a shock that his most popular movie is my least favorite of the Dollars trilogy. Even if you haven't seen this movie, you've heard the music from it. This film has influenced movies of all genres since its 1966 release. Without a doubt, it's the most popular western ever made, and it catapulted Clint Eastwood to international fame. Having said that, I do take issue with it in a lot of ways. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. Here's why. Like I said, the Man with No Name is my favorite movie character. The first two movies, Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, introduce him as a mysterious drifter who's fast on the draw, great with a gun, and as tough as nails. He shows up, kicks a lot of ass, says a few words, and rides off. He's not your typical squeaky clean, goody two-shoes cowboy good hero. He fights dirty, he's greedy, he's rugged, and he's ruthless. And he kills just as easily and as ruthless as the villain would. In many ways, he helped create the first true cinematic anti-hero, arguably. You know, after watching the first two movies, you're left in awe as his badassery and awesomeness make him an unstoppable force. But The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly kind of strips that away. And now I'm going to explain. I watched the first two movies as a kid, and I loved them. Then in high school, I was reintroduced to them, and I fell in love all over again. Up until that point, I hadn't seen the third movie. Then I heard the synopsis. During the Civil War, $200,000 of gold is buried in a graveyard, and the Man with No Name is up against a ruthless mercenary and a Mexican bandit in an epic quest across the Wild West. I was so excited. It's also a prequel set far before the first two movies, and it explains how the Man with No Name got his iconic look. This was going to be the best Western ever, maybe even the best movie ever. When I finally watched it, I was so disappointed. There's three title characters. The Good, the Man with No Name, the Bad, Angel Eyes, and the Ugly Tuco. I hated Tuco. He's a whiny little runt. He's annoying and I just hated him. This entire movie was a Tuco fest. The majority of the film was focused on him. He had the most of the screen time out of the three, and not by a little. He's basically in every scene. The Man with No Name barely has any solo screen time. I mean, you basically have to wait a full 30 minutes until he makes an appearance. And what drives me crazy is Tuco is the only character to get the best of the Man with No Name and literally get away with it. I mean, I know the Man with No Name comes out on top at the end and he wins, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't satisfying. He was basically Tuco's hostage the whole movie. Just once, I would have liked to see him get beat up by the Man with No Name. Or at least have a better comeback like he did in the other films. On to my next point. There's literally no villain in this movie. Angel Eyes was a great character, but he was only in the movie for like 10 minutes. He only fired his gun twice, and he only killed 3 people, and technically 2 were in self-defense. Not to mention, he only really fought with the other main characters once. For the most part, their paths barely crossed until the end. So if you ask me, the guy who's in a 3-hour movie for like 10 minutes contributes basically little to the action or opposition to the hero. He's so not the villain. Granted, he is a great character and Lee Van Cleef did a great job, but I wasn't satisfied with him. Okay, so this one really took me by surprise, but the Civil War subplot was focused on too much. I'm really into military history. I love it. And I'm actually a Civil War reenactor, but the constant focus on the war took too much attention off the main plot. They kept hitting you over the head with the anti-war, anti-violence tropes, and honestly, if they paid more attention to the Wild West aspect than they did the Civil War, the movie would have been so much better. But to be fair, I would be lying if I said I didn't want to see a battle or some sort of military combat in this. But if they cut some of the army scenes out, the movie would have been a lot better. These are just two random things I didn't like. The main plot of going after the gold took almost an hour and a half to start, and most of the journey to the gold was overshadowed by the Civil War. It didn't feel like much of a quest. If they paid more attention to that, it'd be so much more fun, and it'd have more of a build-up and more excitement over finding the treasure. There wasn't much action in this movie. The first two movies were full of fun gunfights and badass shootouts, and the action in this movie was few and far between. And in between the action scenes were a bunch of fluff and boring things I didn't care about. Lastly, I hated how the Man with No Name only wore his iconic poncho for the last 15 minutes. I know it's a prequel, but his character is not complete without his awesome costume. I'd like it if he wore it more. Having said that, there are things I like about this movie. I like the gunfight in the graveyard in the final scene. The music of this movie is awesome, and it's basically the anthem of the Wild West. It's just unfortunate that I don't enjoy this movie as much as others do. In a way, I almost feel guilty for not liking it, because it's so iconic and the premise is just epic. Whoa, that was long. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like always, comment below, like, subscribe. And if I missed anything, feel free to let me know. And I'll see you next time on Unpopular Opinion.